way to work. I'm actually dropping off my stock 68 Charger axles to a friend of mine named George. He's in the old Mopars as well, and I was like, man, I'm not doing anything with these axles. If you want them, I'll give them to you. He's like, yeah, bring them on. So a fellow Mopar enthusiast. So I'm gonna drop them off here this morning real quick at his house. So let me throw these out real quick. He's got a really cool car. So it's 33 degrees this morning on February 18th, 2023. You may be wondering why I'm driving my black truck to work. I normally don't get to drive this truck anymore because my wife is kind of taking it over. But of course, she tells me there's some problem with it. That's why I get to drive it. And so my wife's driving this truck and she tells me, hey, the truck's making a noise and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. So I had her, we drove it the other night, it was fine, went to town, you know, 5-10 minute drive, it was fine. Come home and I stand in the driveway and have her drive it, do circles around and come back, and it doesn't make any noise. She's all frustrated. I said, there's nothing wrong with the truck, like you're hearing something else. So apparently when she drives at a longer distance, like let's say 20-30 minutes or so, it starts making a noise. She said it's like a squeaking noise, and then she can feel it in the steering wheel, and I'm like, well, that's clearly the hub bearing. I mean, there's nothing else it could be. When it gets hot, a bearing's gonna start acting up, but when it's cold, a bearing can be fine. All right, so it's the next day. Just to close the loop on my 08 F150. I never could get it to make the noise for me. My wife said it seemed to make it after she drove it roughly about 30 minutes and as she was turning right, but she failed to kind of clarify that she was basically hitting the brakes or kind of turning in a parking lot and kind of riding the brakes a little bit, you know, and it was doing it. So I took the front end apart this morning, started inspecting everything. What I came up with was the brake pad to rotor didn't look right to me. So this is a brand new Duralast rotor with brand new brake pads. I just got through putting it all together, greasing the pins and putting grease on the pads, everything, just to keep it from squeaking. And you put them on the outside here where the metal tabs are and right in here where it makes connection. That just helps it from making any noise later. But you also spray the rotor off, get all the TTSaleen and stuff off of it, or whatever you want to call it, that coating they put on it. It cleans all that oil off of it. This is the old rotor here. And as you can tell, it doesn't look the greatest. But what I want to show you is this ridge right here that it's got going on. That doesn't look the greatest, and there's a really shiny line right here on the edge, and it's more pronounced kind of here on the brake pad, if you can see it there right on the top. See how that line is at the top? And on this one's more extreme. This is the front pad compared to that other one that was the back side of the rotor. So it's the front side of the rotor. See how that's dragging in there? See how that was riding? So apparently these are ceramic pads and they're really aggressive. They do great for keeping brake dust down, but they're super aggressive on your rotor. And I had life left in these, but you know what? I just went back to semi-metallic just to keep from eating the rotors up so bad. But I think somewhere along the line, this right here was basically the way it was rolling around and dragging. It was dragging into this somehow and making it make that noise is what I believe, just because of the way this is so shiny and the way it's just digging into that. So that clearly wasn't making flat, smooth contact. And you can see where it's just digging into the pad, not smoothly. And again, nature of ceramic type of pads, they're really aggressive compound. They do great for keeping brake dust down, but they do a number on your rotors over time. So I've switched back to an OE style pad, which is the semi-metallic, and that's what's on here now. And a fresh set of rotors. Instead of going to O'Reilly's where those rotors and pads came from, I went to AutoZone. So these are the Duralast rotors, and what you'll notice is the vent here is actually a little bit bigger than what was in the rotors from O'Reilly's. Theirs were a little narrower. This is actually a little bit wider, so I like this a little bit better. But these are gonna run you about $110 a piece, and then the pads are gonna run you about $52 a piece, because this is the kit It comes with the new hardware, which is this piece that goes across top and bottom that holds the pads in. It's a good idea to go ahead and get those if yours are dirty, nasty, what have you. And again, you put your brake quiet on there, which basically keeps everything from getting in a bind, sliding properly, and from making noise. And while you're here, pull these pins out, make sure they're nice and clean, and then put your grease on them, put them back in, slide them a few times. This helps the caliper to slide back and forth smoothly. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the other side apart and do it. Just wanted to show you, I'm pretty sure this is the issue. You can tell this is my brand new hub that I changed recently, and I couldn't tell that the hub was giving a problem in the bearing. That's originally what I thought it was, but the strut's new, the upper control arm's new. I mean, all that stuff has been changed. So I was had an idea it might be the brakes, but after seeing that ridge that was on it and the way the pads were in funny, pretty sure that was the noise she was hearing. So today I'm doing a little maintenance on my F150. So while the Charger is still waiting for the diff to be built, I thought I'd do some maintenance. Got my F150 in here. As you know, in the last time I had this thing out, my wife complained when she turned to the right, she heard a squeaking, squealing noise, whatever. It just needed new rotors and pads. So I put that on it. She still told me she heard this noise, so I finally got her to record the noise. Well, what was happening when she was sitting still, not actually going down the road, she said, first she told me when she was going and turning right, she could hear the noise, but she finally recorded it. She was sitting still and would turn the wheel, and she heard this squeaking noise, like a in the steering. And I said, well, that's easy. That's probably, on these trucks, it's probably the lower ball joint. So let me show you how that works. So down here, is the pivot point. So as the steering arm moves left and right, it actually pivots right here on this lower ball joint. Now I've already replaced this one. This is the new one I just put in last night. You can see I've already had to change the outer tie rod on this one, and the upper control arm I changed last year on it. I've also changed the strut and coil spring on this thing last year. But the lower ball joint I had never changed. Well, as you turn, the load's right here, and as you would turn, this thing would squeak. And it's a common problem on these 04 to 08 F-150s. It may affect the new ones too, but for specifically this model. So I went ahead and replaced this ball joint last night, put the new one on it, and when I pulled it out, it was definitely wore out. But this is probably, if you got a squeak in the front end, more than likely it's gonna be the lower ball joint. So this is it. And this is probably the cause of most of the problem, where she was hearing a squeaking noise. So anyway, while I was under here, I said, well, let me check everything. So with the wheel on, you can actually move it left and right and see if you have any play. If you have any play, it'll be right here in the outer tie rod. Again, you can see I've changed this one in the past because it's giving me trouble. If you have any popping in the front end, typically it's right here in the sway bar end link, and I've actually had to change that about 2 years ago, so that one's replaced. And if you ever go to get a line and you have either popping in the front end or alignment's off, normally it's this upper control arm assembly. Instead of trying to change just the upper ball joint, it's normally easier just to buy the whole upper control arm assembly, which I did in this case, and that is it. I want to show you over here, and you want to move the wheel left and right to see if you have any play. So I want you to focus right here. This is the outer tie rod. You can see I've never changed this one. This one looks factory original. And I want you to look right here as I go to move the wheel left and right. That play that you're seeing right there means this outer tie rod joint, that is wore out. So I'm gonna have to get a new piece, which is this outer tie rod. It's actually from here to here. I'm gonna have to get a new one and replace this out. So I'm getting ready to take the wheel off. As you can see down here on the lower ball joint, this is the original on this side as well. I'm going to install my new ball joint that I just got to match the other side. So as I have to take all this apart anyway, I've got to break this loose. When you get ready to take this out, once you pop this loose and push this out, you want to go from the center of the stud with a tape measure and measure somewhere up along here so you have a good measurement. So typically you measure right here at the end of the thread where it's the flat part, and you'll get that measurement. Let's say it's 6 inches or what have you, and you mark from the center of the stud to there. When you get your new arm, you want to line it up. So once you put it on here and tighten your jam nut, the center of this is the same distance to that point that you marked. And then your alignment should be really close. I'm still gonna get the alignment checked after the fact anyway, just cause I put new ball joints on the bottom to make sure everything's still aligned. But that should get it where it's not gonna be, steering's gonna be off so bad that the alignment's gonna be super bad, so you can't just drive it. But that's a good way to get it very close so you don't have to worry about driving it. All right, a few things here. I'm not gonna show you every single step to tear down, but to give you an overall view, I got the outer tie rod here, and let's see if I can do this so you can see it. So that joint's pretty much, see there, it's shot. So gonna replace that. Never had this hub off before, and still spins freely, but you hear the bearing. Normally it should be tighter than that, just because it's been on the truck for 15 years. I think I'm gonna go ahead and get a brand new hub for it, which comes with all new bearings out here and the little inner bearing right in there. And go ahead and change it, just cause, you know, you basically tear everything completely down to get to this point. This is the outer axle piece here. This is called the ICW. This is basically what applies vacuum. And when it applies vacuum onto here like this, it engages the hub assembly. So you don't have to get out and manually lock in your hubs. So I've got to clean all this old grease and grime out of here and then re-grease it. But this is basically vacuum operated. Pulls the vacuum, locks in the hub. Pretty simple how it works. I've already cleaned this part up of the axle. And unfortunately, when you use a pickle fork, which is what this is, use this to actually break free your upper control arm from the upright assembly, which is right here, which holds everything in place. You will tear your boot. So you see there, I've already torn my boot. So I need to try to get this. I've replaced this arm about 2 years ago. It's still in good shape. The joint still tight and good shape, and the bushings here in good shape. So I need to see if I can get a new rubber boot, push that off, put a new boot on. If not, my grease is gonna squirt out and make a mess. Then the joint will actually dry out. I have a way to grease this joint, but if the grease comes out the boot, it's kind of a waste. While I'm in here, I see my sway bar link looks okay. So other than that, you have a O-ring clip, a hog ring, whatever you want to call it, that goes right here on the lower ball joint. So you remove that. I always like to clean it with some brake clean, wipe it all off, get the dirt out of the way. And then I like to use some BB Blaster, let it soak. And what I like to do then is take a hammer, bang on it a few times just to kind of break everything free and loosen up. And you'll notice it's already moved down a little bit. Right here is a little bit of a gap. That just helps kind of get it started. Then I'll use my tool to go ahead and push the lower ball joint all the way out, and I'll press the new one in. But you got to take all this out of the way just to get access right here to the lower ball joint. So I'll push that out, push a new one in, start putting the upright assembly back in. Before I can finish that, I have to go get a new hub assembly, and I'll put the new hub assembly on, clean up and grease all the axle and the ICW there, slide it back in. Then I need to get an outer tie rod piece here, and then I'll need to change the boot here on the upper ball joint. And probably because I'm going to get questions, how does this work? So this is what the tool looks like. You have various attachments in here. You pick the biggest one that'll go over your bearing, so the bearing drops down inside this cup. And then at the bottom, you have a bigger opening than this, so the stud pokes through. And then you line it all up at the bottom. You take the stud at the top, you center it, you get all this centered, and then I'm using an impact, and you just drive it straight down, and it starts pushing out right here. So let me show you what that looks like. it. That is the stock lower ball joint pushed out, and it's an interference fit. So basically, this takes a lot of effort to push the new one in, but when you push it in, it actually is in there super tight. And then you have this O-ring. So what you get in the pack is retaining nut, a new boot, and then this is it. Now what you want to do is you want to install this without the boot first, because the boot gets in the way. You give this nice boot installer tool that goes over there and pushes it on for you. Trust me, you'll need that later. And then this is the hog ring, I call it, which safely puts it on. You got a cotter pin for later when you put your nut on, and you got a grease fitting that goes into here. Now they have pre-greased it, but I always put a little extra grease in there after the fact to go ahead and fill up the boot a little bit. So that's it. So now the trick is to make sure they're compatible. The stud's a little shorter, but that's okay. That's not a big deal. This is the end that makes a difference. And we're gonna bring this over here, kind of make sure that's gonna line up in there, which it is, like so. No problem. And now the difference is we have to have a piece that fits this. So I know this cup's gonna work because I used it on the other side. It's gonna drop on like that, so it fits around the outside parameter. And then like before, we have to have this piece. You see how it's got a notch that fits down in there. So this goes on here, centers that. That drops onto the bottom. It goes up in here. We put our top piece on, and then we start tightening it up. As we tighten up, we have this piece that drops into here, and it actually pushes against it. We have to have this collar on the top. It allows it to come all the way through and stick through, because if not, if it was flat, it wouldn't go all the way through and seat. So this actually goes on top, so we can pull it all the way through. So I'll get that all finished up, and we'll have the lower ball joint in place. We'll move on to the next step. All right, wrap it all up. It is now back together. Of course, I zipped through everything because I gotta get this finished. But there's the new outer tie rod. There is the new lower ball joint. This is the brand new hub, which you can clearly see in there. And it comes with a new ABS line, which you basically run up and over, and it plugs in. It's kind of hidden, but the line runs up and over. It's a little fastener right here. You reach in behind here and pop that loose and unplug the old one, plug in the new connector, run it down. Got these plastic clips here from the factory. Sometimes they break, and you can use a zip tie to tie them up to the brake caliper. Just want to make sure everything is nice and neat here to where the hub turns around on the back side to the ICW. Then you hook up your brakes and you're ready to go. I always go through and make sure I spray some brake cleaner on here and wipe off any grease or oil or anything I may have got my hands on it. And now we're ready to go. So I'm ready to put the wheels back on it and tighten it down. But before I do that, I've noticed these bigger tires I've got have been rubbing a little bit. You can see telltale signs right here and telltale signs right here. So I've got some spacers coming. I had 1 1/4 inch spacers, but they wouldn't quite clear the end of the lugs. So I've got 1 1/2 inch spacers coming. They'll be here tomorrow. Gonna put those on. It's gonna space the wheel 1 1/2 inches further out. And then it should give me a little bit more clearance where when you turn the tires in full left or full right, they should not hit in those spots. So I'm gonna put those on, then this project should be finished. Again, new hub on the front. I've already changed one on the passenger side. Just did a brake job, new brake pads, new rotors. Now it's got new hubs, new rotors, new brake pads, new lower ball joints on both sides, new outer tie rod on this side. The other one had been changed. New struts on the front the last 2 years on both sides, new upper control arms on both sides in the last 2 years. So basically the whole front end has been rebuilt on this truck. All right, just to show you the spacers finally came in today. These are the 1.5 inch spacers, and the reason I had to have those, if you see right here on the studs, it's absolutely flush right here with the edge. So now the wheel is going to mount flat, and that's very important because if these were sticking out like the 1.25 inch, these are sticking out, there's no way the wheel would fit flat against that. But now the studs are flat against this, so 1.5 inch works. It's a 6x135, and the studs are a 4x2. So that's very important when you get ready to order these spacers for your F150, or 14x2, excuse me. When you order the studs for your F150, that's the spacers that you're gonna need. And just to show you what I mean by flat, this is the back of the wheel. See how it's flat, it's not recessed. Some wheels have a little recessed piece right here, so you could probably get away with it. Maybe the newer style wheels like 15 and up, but on this Harley wheel, see how it's flat right there. So that's the issue. And just when I tell you they're real Ford Harley wheels, this is how you know. See the Ford symbol there, 22x9. These were made January of 2008. So get ready to throw these on. That's gonna give me the offset I need. Unfortunately, when I bought these spacers, only 2 came in the kit. So we're gonna put them on the front to give me the clearance I need, so I won't be hitting down in here and back here. But to make sure the offset's the same front and rear, I had to just go order 2 more for the back. So it's gonna bring the back out a little bit. You can see it there. It'll bring it probably out flush with the fender there. All right, just to show you the spacers finally came in today. These are the 1.5 inch spacers, and the reason I had to have those, if you see it here on the studs, it's absolutely flush right here with the edge. So now the wheel is going to mount flat, and that's very important because if these were sticking out like the 1.25 inch, these are sticking out, there's no way the wheel would fit flat against that. But now the studs are flat against this, so 1.5 inch works. It's a 6x135, and the studs are a 4x2. So that's very important when you get ready to order these spacers for your F150, or 14x2, excuse me. When you order the studs for your F150, that's the spacers that you're gonna need. And just to show you what I mean by flat, this is the back of the wheel. See how it's flat, it's not recessed. Some wheels have a little recessed piece right here, so you could probably get away with it. Maybe the newer style wheels like 15 and up, but on this Harley wheel, see how it's flat right there. So that's the issue. And just when I tell you they're real Ford Harley wheels, this is how you know. See the Ford symbol there, 22x9. These were made January of 2008. So get ready to throw these on. That's gonna give me the offset I need. Unfortunately, when I bought these spacers, only 2 came in the kit. So we're gonna put them on the front to give me the clearance I need, so I won't be hitting down in here and back here. But to make sure the offset's the same front and rear, I had to just go order 2 more for the back. So it's gonna bring the back out a little bit. You can see it there. It'll bring it probably out flush with the fender there.